This week's module, we're going to look at adding roles to our ASP.NET MVC application. To do that, we're going to start by enhancing our database. We'll add some additional tables to our database to enable us to have roles and give users specific roles. So we'll right-click on Tables, Add New Table, and we will create a roles table. And this table will have a primary key. It will also have a name for the role, and then I'm going to add a boolean called isAdmin, and I'll make that a bit type. Alright, and what that'll basically do, we'll default that to 0. And what we'll basically do is we'll have, for now, just two different types of roles. We'll have a regular user role and an admin role, and then we'll use that bit field to identify if the role that was selected is an admin level role. Alright, so we'll go ahead and update our database. And then we'll come back and actually create a second table, and this will be a many-to-many table that will be our user roles table. And this table will need two values that'll both be the primary key together. We'll have user underscore ID and role underscore ID. So basically a user would have a role and they cannot have that same role more than once, so we're going to go ahead and make these together a primary key. So together these two columns have to be unique. You cannot have two columns or two rows with the same user and role ID. And then the idea is that when we assign a user a role, we'll put their user ID from the users table in here as well as the role ID from the roles table, and that will set them up to have their user and their role. So we'll update our database with that table as well. Alright, so we now have two new tables added to our database. And we'll do a quick refresh, and there's our roles, products. Actually, I gave these the wrong name, so let me open them again. I didn't even follow my own conventions. So this will be TBL user roles. We'll push that up real fast. Now because I made that table change, because I'm making changes to the table names, they will actually replicate as completely new tables. So when we come back to the Server Explorer and refresh this again, we're going to have a roles table, a TBL roles, and a user roles, as well as a TBL user role. So I'm going to delete the ones missing the TBL prefix. Alright, there we go. So now let's jump back into our DB context and our models. And let's start by creating a new class for roles. This time I'm going to do Shift-Alt-C, which is a keyboard shortcut to creating a new class. And I'll call this role. And I'll do the same thing again, and we'll call it user role. Alright, so inside of user role, we'll simply have a user ID int field, or int property, and then we'll also create an int of role ID. And then we can go back and expand this in a little bit. And then inside of role, we will have public int ID, public string name, and public bool is admin. Alright, so we can go ahead and add our attributes such as key. We'll use table, and this will be a TBL role. We'll save that. And then we have the user role table. And what we can do here is we'll say that this is a table and it utilizes TBL user underscore role. And then when we define this, we will define this as a key, and we'll bring in that using statement, but we're going to need to define this as being a key that actually is part of a collective key where you have two fields that are acting as the key together. So to define our composite key with two fields, we'll use key still, and we'll define both of these as having a key. But then we're also going to give it a second attribute, and this can be done by adding another square bracket set and just stacking. We're going to say column, and inside of here we're going to do parentheses, and we're going to utilize this order property that's labeled as optional, and we'll say order equals 0. And then I'm going to do a different way where I can do comma within the same brackets and say column, and then this one will be order equals 1. And the reason why we're doing order equals with these numbers is that this is important to tell the entity framework which order do these fields show up in our table. So if we look at the user roles table, the user ID or user underscore ID is the 0 position or the first item in the table that's part of the key, and then role underscore ID is the second position or second item or position 1, quote unquote, inside of the table. So this helps the entity framework to understand that both of these together work as a composite key, and it helps it understand then what we're doing to get this accomplished. Okay, so we've now decorated our models. So now let's jump into our context and we'll update this as well. So public DbSet, and then here we will do role. And these will be a collection of roles, and then public DbSet user role, and this will be a collection of user roles. Now the last thing that I do want to do real fast is I want to jump into user role and set up my many-to-many relationship. So I'm going to do a public virtual, and this will be a role first. And I'm going to do get set. Public virtual role, and I'll call it role. This will have a get set, and then I'll do a public virtual user, call it user, and it'll also have a get set. And then I'll add my foreign key attribute here and say that this points to role ID, and then a foreign key attribute here, and this points to user ID. One other thing I did realize is that in my table I have user underscore ID and role underscore ID, so I need to actually come in here as well and change the name of this. So we're going to go ahead and put in here, we'll say that this is user underscore ID, comma, and then here we'll do role underscore ID, comma. Alright, so that way the entity framework knows that user ID should really be user underscore ID, role ID is really role underscore ID, and then we still have that ordering for our composite key. Alright, so let's save that, and we'll do a quick build, make sure everything's in good shape. And the build is successful. So now we're ready to start on step 2.